with the biggest increases for seniors and working families. It would radically change the Medicaid program, slashing funding and covering fewer people. The bill will force governors and state legislators to ration care. And who will they want to cut, or who will they cut? Children, the elderly, people with disabilities. In fact, our Republican Governor Bruce Rauner said that our state, Illinois, quote, won't do very well, unquote, if the Republican repeal bill becomes law. I oppose this bill because I believe that all Americans deserve access to Affordable Care Act. If we want to work together, let's fix Obamacare.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Mullen, for 1 minute.
I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. Chair recognizes gentleman Mr. Butterfield for 1 minute for an opening statement.
One of the proudest days in American legislative history was the enactment of the Affordable Care Act. It put in place a way for every American citizen to obtain affordable health care coverage. The law provides subsidies for those low and middle income Americans to assist with the purchase of insurance. It took insurance companies out of the equations. It prevents insurance companies from denying coverage. It provided for expanding Medicaid to allow those low-income, childless adults to obtain coverage through the Medicaid program, and we agreed to pay 90% of the cost. You have tried and failed on more than 50 occasions to repeal this law. Now you have a president who is willing to join you in your repeal efforts. You want to eliminate subsidies, and you want to replace them simply with a $2,000 tax credit that taxpayers will receive on their taxes. Millions of Americans don't have the money to pay for insurance without assistance. You must know that. You have the numbers here in this House to pass this legislation, but you must, as Mr. Doyle said a minute ago, you must understand the political consequences when you take 20 million people and take their insurance away from them.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes, I guess, next the gentleman from New York, Mr. Collins.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
Chair would now recognize the gentlelady from California, my friend Ms. Matsui, for 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 6 years ago, we carefully crafted a plan that has provided access to care for over 20 million people. Today, you are taking all of that away. This so-called plan will do nothing but ration care and drive up costs for hard-working families across this country. Hundreds of people in my district have filled my town halls, called my office, and written me about how they rely on the ACA's benefits. People like Kate Washington, who came to my town hall in Sacramento and described her husband's battle with cancer. She spoke about the importance of removing lifetime caps on coverage included in the ACA. This is personal for Kate, it's personal for all of my constituents, it's personal for me. Democrats are not going to stand for this plan to slash funding for long-term care, substance abuse, and preventive services. We'll not engage in this effort to raise out-of-pocket costs for seniors, reverse the progress we have made on mental health reform, and put Medicare at risk. We are united in our determination to stop this attempt to ration care for the most vulnerable in our communities. There is so much on the line today for so many, and Republicans are ignoring what's at stake.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Dakota, Mr. Kramer. Gentleman reserves his time. Mr. Sarbanes, you're recognized for 1 minute for purposes of an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Make no mistake, this proposal will effectively destroy the health insurance exchanges, which have made a difference for millions of Americans across the country. It downgrades the credits that are available in the exchanges and eliminates other supports that offer relief from deductibles and copays. The bottom line is the cost of purchasing health care in the exchanges will go up for many people, particularly for older Americans, those who are approaching Medicare but are not yet eligible, who are trying to get coverage. This will effectively destroy the Medicaid program. It takes money away from the Medicaid program, which serves millions of hardworking Americans, people with disabilities, seniors, and nursing homes, while giving a huge tax break to wealthy Americans, pharmaceutical companies, and the health insurance industry. This proposal, the GOP proposal, sends us back to the days where millions of people are left out of the healthcare system and turn to hospital emergency rooms to get their care, driving the cost of premiums up for everyone else. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we work to improve the Medicaid program, it is necessary that we maintain the existing state-federal partnership. A key piece of the reforms we are considering today is providing states with the flexibility to administer their individual programs. That includes the ability for states to innovate and implement initiatives within federal Medicaid guidelines. Flexibility is critical because many states have implemented programs, such as California's hospital financing program, to supplement state Medicaid funds. It is encouraging that nothing in this legislation limits that state flexibility to administer such programs. Reforming the existing Medicaid program is critical. Without reform, we cannot ensure quality to our most vulnerable populations while safeguarding the long-term solvency of this essential program. An improved state-federal partnership that expands state flexibility is just one of the ways we can achieve that goal. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, for a 1-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This Republican plan is trying to do health care on the cheap. The bottom line is that if you are a family living paycheck to paycheck, you have a lot to be afraid of. You will either pay more for less coverage or you will lose coverage altogether. In the 3 counties of my district, 263,000 people gained coverage with the Affordable Care Act. All of them are at risk. In San Joaquin County, 4,000 people's jobs will be lost if the ACA is repealed like this. The Republican plan enhances health savings accounts, but how does that help people that live paycheck to paycheck? States will get less funding for Medicaid and will throw people off coverage or provide less coverage. This plan is especially hurtful to seniors with a double whammy. They'll have higher premiums or tax credit reductions. So why are we doing this? This is a charge of the Light Brigade. Your members will get hurt, and this bill has no chance of passage. Mr. Chairman, withdraw this message bill and work with us to improve the Affordable Care Act.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Costello, for an opening statement.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, there's been a lot of discussion about the fact that this bill has just appeared yesterday and that it was being hidden. Was it really being hidden from Democrats in America, or was it being hidden from your Freedom Caucus? They say that this bill is a phony repeal of Obamacare. And you want to know something? They're right, because there is a lot of plagiarism in this bill. The insurance reforms that all of you voted against, you're now bragging you're keeping. The subsidies that you say are horrible, you have changed from a direct subsidy that actually provided meaningful access to health care to on-the-cheap tax credits that don't do the job. But that's an entitlement that you say you're against. The mandate, you've decried the mandate, but what you've done is imposed a 30% penalty, and the revenues don't go to the health care program, the revenues go to the insurance companies. What is going on here?
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Buddy Carter, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we're taking the first step to fixing our healthcare system that is failing for millions of Americans. After watching promise after promise broken, it is clear that a top-down, one-size-fits-all model for healthcare has provided us with little choice and a wealth of mandates. Our plan recognizes that people deserve patient-centered care, not more bureaucracy. You should have the freedom and the flexibility to choose the care that's best for you. Insurers should compete for your business and treat you fairly no matter what. And at every step, patients should be in the driver's seat. We're taking steps in our plan to strengthen the healthcare market by loosening Obamacare's age rating ratio, which is used to adjust premium amounts according to an individual's age. This unrealistic regulation has filled insurance pools with older, less healthy individuals while driving younger and healthier individuals from the insurance market, driving the cost of healthcare up for everyone. As members of Congress, we have a responsibility not to sit idly by, but to take the necessary steps to repair our healthcare system, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Time has expired. Chair recognizes the chairman of the DCC. My friend from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's bill should be about real people, real families living check to check, real parents trying to care for their sick kids. But that's not the bill before us today, not even close. This legislation begs two questions from my friends across the aisle. Have they forgotten these real hardworking people, or are they intentionally ignoring them? Because this bill pits sick children against aging grandparents, and it turns its back on families living check to check. The bill literally charges the disabled, senior citizens, women, and children more, then gives tax breaks to the very wealthy and to insurance companies. As Mr. Spiro wrote, it's Republicans who are rushing to jam through their legislation to repeal the law in a highly secretive process. Speaker Ryan said, we're not hatching some bill in a back room and plopping it on the American people's front door. I'll say just check Rand Paul's Twitter feeds. This is what Mr. Spiro also wrote. Republicans are making their members walk the plank with blindfolds on because they have no other choice. I hope my colleagues ask the tough questions that their constituents are demanding, because this is the time to ask those questions. We cannot go home to our people
Gentleman's
that
time
trusted us
has
without any
expired.
answers.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Hudson, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's a great day for America. Today's about Sandra from Stanley County, North Carolina, whose deductible increased from $200 a month before Obamacare to over $3,000 a month. She told me that she actually some months has to decide between going to the doctor and buying groceries. It's about Kevin from Cabarrus County, North Carolina, whose insurance premiums rose from $110 a month to $730 a month, a 700% increase, with a deductible of $7,600. That means he's got to pay $16,000 out of pocket before he even accesses health care. This is about Colleen, a small business owner who started a business in her garage, now has 30 employees. After the Affordable Care Act passed, she got a letter saying her insurance company was dropping their coverage. They were saying, no thanks. This is about real people out there who are being hurt. And today, we begin the process of bringing them relief, of putting them in control so that they can decide what kind of health care they want and they can get it at a price they can afford. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you on this.
Gentlemen.
It's not a perfect bill, but it's the right direction. Thank you.
Gentleman, time has expired. I appreciate gentleman's comments. We'll now go to Mr. Tonko for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had prepared a longer, more detailed opening statement, but in yet another breach of this committee's tradition and protocols that are quickly becoming the norm, I was informed that members would only be allowed 1 minute to speak. This is clearly an attempt to silence us. Our voices and the voices of the American people, however, will not be silenced. With the brief time that I do have, let me just say that the Republican repeal plan before us is a tax cut bill dressed up as a health care bill. Nothing in this bill will lower out-of-pocket health care costs for families or address outrageous prescription drug prices. Nothing in this bill will make Americans healthier or more financially secure. Most egregiously, this bill will rip health care away from millions of currently insured Americans in a cynical ploy to deliver tax cuts to the super rich. I oppose this bill, and I will fight it with every fiber of my being and with all the energy I have, because unlike some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I did not get elected to take health care away from my constituents.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes Gentlelady Ms. Clark for a minute for opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. Chair recognizes gentleman from Iowa for an opening statement.
Mr. Chair, I reserve.
Chairman recognizes gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Schrader, for an opening statement. Gentleman recognizes Mr. Kennedy. Reserves. Where do we go next? The gentleman from California, I guess, is next. I'm just trying to figure out the flow here.
Mr. Chairman, I
Recognized
reserve.
for 1 minute. Reserves. Gentleman recognized another gentleman from California, Ms. Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I became a doctor to help struggling families get the care they need when they need it most. Healthcare providers like me want nothing more than for patients to have adequate health coverage so they can have the access to care that they need, preventative, primary, follow-up services, you name it. But just because coverage is offered, if people can't afford it, what good will it do? Affordability equals access. In my years in medicine, I've never met a patient who didn't have coverage because they didn't want it. They didn't have coverage because they couldn't afford it. So I am deeply concerned that this bill will make premiums and other healthcare costs unaffordable for working families and seniors, and they will lose their insurance and care. At a time when far too many Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, this bill will impose harsh penalties, call it a sick tax, for patients for an entire year if, for no fault of their own, lost their job and lost their insurance. It will drastically increase premiums for seniors because they will have to pay 5 times more coverage than young adults. This bill is unacceptable. This will make healthcare more costly for families, for seniors, and they will get less in return.
Time has expired. Chair would recognize the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Harper, for 1 minute for an opening statement.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Who's next on your side? Mr. Peters for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't here for the fight over Obamacare, but I came to this committee this year antsy to be part of a constructive effort to continue to improve the healthcare system. And there were a lot of great things in the Affordable Care Act, which apparently the majority agrees because they are trying to preserve or recreate many of them. In some places, like my district, where so many get insurance through their employer or through the covered California exchange, it's working pretty well. And in fact, in my district, the uninsured rate has dropped from 9.4% to 5.4% since the ACA was passed. But we know that in other markets, they're lacking competition and consumers are faced with fewer options. And I acknowledge that these are challenges that need to be addressed, but I also recognize that clearly there's no interest from the majority in a bipartisan solution to fix them. Instead, we have a proposal that would damage these markets even further and shift more costs onto working families. The majority gave up on getting any of our votes before they even began writing their bill, and that's a shame because we can do better. We have to do better, and I hope whether this bill dies on the floor of the House or the door to the Senate that we will do better than this.
Gentleman's time has expired. Are there any members on the majority side that would like to seek recognition? Seeing none, Chair recognizes now the gentlelady from Michigan, Ms. Dingell, for 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing but respect for my colleagues on the other side, but respectfully have huge differences today. Our job is to represent the working men and women and their families of our district and to fight to protect them. As been said several times, pure and simply, this bill is less coverage, fewer protections, and higher costs. I wasn't in Congress when we passed the Affordable Care Act, but I know someone who was intimately involved in the process. In fact, we're in a room that bears his name. This was his life's work, and I can tell you that on behalf of John Dingell, President Ted Kennedy should have been, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the generations of other leaders who fought for the right of every American for a quality, affordable health care. We cannot let you take health care away from people who need it most, and we will not go down without a fight.
Thank you, Jeb.
I yield back the rest of my time.
Gentlelady yields back the balance of time. Are there any members on the majority side seeking recognition? Seeing none, any on the Democratic side seeking recognition? An opening statement? Seeing, is that a yes now? Okay. Gentleman from Iowa, Ms. Loebsack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today we are considering a bill that will rip quality care from Iowans. This legislation works to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which has helped Iowans get back on their feet and has provided quality health care to thousands of Iowa families. Under the Affordable Care Act, 255,000 uninsured Iowans gained expanded health insurance options both through Medicaid and private health plans within the marketplace. Additionally, hundreds of thousands of Iowans have gained coverage for affordable preventative health care services. Rather than improving our nation's health care, today's legislation would move us backwards, stripping Iowans of important health care services and covering fewer people at higher costs. Since the debate about how to improve our nation's health care system began, my number one priority has been to ensure all Iowans and Americans have access to quality, affordable care. This legislation undermines that goal. Make no mistake about it. Today, the health care of my constituents, Iowans, and Americans is at risk, and that is something that I will not stand for, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Okay, let's go through the list here. Ms. Clark for 1 minute for opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm against the sham reverse Robin Hood take from the poor, give to the rich American Health Care Act. The Republicans would like to paint a rosy utopian picture of life prior to the Affordable Care Act. That's fake news, as Donald Trump would say. Well, let me remind you of how it really was prior to the Affordable Care Act. Prior to the ACA, in the United States, one of the wealthiest nations in the world, we had nearly 47 million Americans who lacked health insurance. Additionally, a study by the Department of Health and Human Services found that 17.1 million Americans under the age of 65 were underinsured, of which 9.3 million had employer-based insurance. Tragically, people in these situations often had to go without vital health care simply because they couldn't afford it. However, after the passage of ACA, only 8.6% of Americans, about 27.3 million people, are uninsured. The first time in history that the nation's uninsured rate fell below 9%. The American Health Care Act puts all these positive gains at risk. We can't afford to go back to pre-ACA days. Healthcare is a fundamental human right and not a commodity, not an iPhone as the Republicans are treating it. Highly reckless and extremely irresponsible. We have a responsibility to our citizens.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Other members seeking recognition. Mr. Schrader, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Affordable Care Act is responsible for 20 million Americans getting health care and hundreds of thousands of Oregonians. It's begun to bend the cost curve in health care spending, putting us on a path to sustainability and reducing our deficit, and making sure the Medicare Trust Fund is solvent for many years to come. I'm disappointed to be here today as the Republicans try and repeal this great act. We're marking the bill up without any input from the Congressional Budget Office, risk falling back on the progress we've made to reduce the deficit and ensure seniors, children, and disabled have access to health care. The bill we're considering also rolls back a lot of the progress we've made in my home state of Oregon to bring down costs and improve outcomes without cutting reimbursement. Perhaps worst of all, the bill in front of us today rolled back a lot of successes we've had while failing to fix the problems that need help. Rather than reduce premiums, it has the potential to increase them as much as 30%. We need to do better.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair, any members on the Republican side seeking recognition? Seeing none, Chair recognizes the gentleman, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, I was struck last night by a comment that I heard made by Speaker Ryan, where he called this repeal bill, quote, an act of mercy. With all due respect to our Speaker, he and I must have read different scripture. The one that I read calls on us to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to shelter the homeless, and to comfort the sick. It reminds us that we are judged not by how we treat the powerful, but by how we care for the least among us. Mercy. Defined in purely secular terms, it's compassionate treatment for those in distress. It's kindness, and it is grace. There is no mercy in a system that makes healthcare a luxury. There is no mercy in a country that turns their back on those most in need of protection, the elderly, the poor, the sick, and the suffering. There's no mercy in a cold shoulder to the mentally ill. There's no mercy in a policy that takes for granted the sweat, the tears, and the sacrifice of working Americans that they shed every day so that they might care for their family's basic needs, food, shelter, health, and hope for tomorrow. There's no mercy for the 2.6 million people who will lose their job if Obamacare is repealed. This is not an act of mercy.
Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Washington State, the conference chairman of the Republicans, Ms. Catherine Morris Rogers, for 1 minute for an opening
Thank you, Mr.
statement.
Chairman. We're on a rescue mission. Obamacare, though well-intentioned, has failed. It's failed in its goals, and it has failed in its promises. People in Eastern Washington are paying more and more for health care. Millions of Americans have lost their health care plans. Millions of Americans can no longer access the doctor of their choice. Medicaid, a very important safety net, is plagued with access problems, poor quality of health, unsustainable funding. And this has been going on for years. And yet Obamacare forced about 50% of the newly insured people into Medicaid nationwide. It was over 80% in Washington state. This jeopardizes this important safety net for the people who need it the most, the poor, the elderly, children, people with disabilities. I recognize many individuals with disabilities rely on Medicaid for their health care, and I am committed to ensuring that they have access to care at home and in the community moving forward. Everyone should have access to quality, affordable health care coverage. And that's why we're moving forward with a plan that protects individuals with pre-existing conditions, responsibly unwinds the Medicaid expansion, and helps Americans afford health insurance through advanceable tax credits.
Time has expired. Are there other members seeking recognition? The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute for purposes of an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, the Republicans are cheating hardworking Americans. Their plan will force middle-class families to pay more for less. It takes away health care protections to up to 129 million Americans with pre-existing conditions, and it means seniors will pay up to $2,000 to $3,000 more every year. What's more, this bill lines the pockets of insurance companies. If you have any lapse in coverage, insurance companies have to charge you up to 30% more for the care that you used to get. To add insult to injury, this bill gives a tax break to CEOs of those insurance companies. That's what I call the keep quiet clause. Middle-class families get screwed under this bill. We know that this bill will raise our national deficit and hurt our economy, but we can't tell you exactly by how much because the Congressional Budget Office hasn't had the opportunity to give us that score. Myself and the rest of the members of the committee, your elected representatives, were not allowed to see the bill until 2 days ago. When the Affordable Care Act was passed in 2010, the House alone had 79 public hearings. The bottom line is this: the Republican plan is doing all that it can to kick you to the curb and take away your health care. I yield back.
With that, the gentleman's time's expired. Are there other members seeking recognition who have not been recognized? At that point, then,
Mr. Chairman,
the chair calls up the
Mr.
committee
Chairman,
print. I'll get to you in just a second. The chair calls up the committee print and asks the clerk to report.
Mr. Chairman, I would like
The
to...
chair calls up the committee print. Just a moment, I'll get to you. And asks the committee print, the clerk to report.
Committee print. Budget reconciliation,
Chairman.
legislative recommendations relating to repeal and replace of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act.
Without objection, the first reading of the committee print dispensed with. The committee will print will be open for amendment at any point so ordered. With that, I'd recognize the gentleman from New Jersey.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into some parliamentary inquiries about the process today. I think it'll make it easier for us if you can answer certain questions pursuant to a colloquy with me.
Happy to have that discussion.
First of all, with regard to the schedule, should we be prepared to work late into evening each markup day, or do you plan to complete debate at a certain time and then move to the next?
It appears, based on the fact there are no amendments available for consideration, that we should be done fairly soon.
And what does that mean? What are you referencing now?
Well, no amendments have been filed or shared with the...
We have many amendments, Mr. Chairman.
None of them, just a moment, please. None of them, we're in a colloquy here. We have received no amendments. None have been filed. We look forward to seeing your amendments.
Mr. Chairman,
so
I don't understand what you're talking about. There are numerous amendments on behalf of the Democrats and the minority.
We have no amendments at the table. There are no amendments have been filed. It's hard for me to consider how long we're going to be here until we know what your amendments are.
Okay, if that's
Can you tell me, let me ask you a question. How many amendments do you plan to offer?
I think we have about 100 amendments.
100 amendments. We've not seen any of them.
When
can we anticipate seeing
We will certainly provide you with those amendments.
When will we see those?
My understanding is that they're available.
They're available now? We have not...
They'll be provided within the customary 2-hour limit.
All right. Well, we're kind of there with the bill.
Well, I don't think so. But anyway, obviously, we're not going to answer.
The bill is before it.
We're not going to answer the questions about the schedule. I'm trying to get some handle here. If you just want to be, try to jam this thing through and not talk about the schedule, that's fine. I can play that game too. No questions, no answers about the schedule, correct?
No, that's not what
I simply asked the question.
Gentlemen, please suspend. I can't comment on how long we're going to be here until I know how many amendments we're going to consider. All right, then you told me now for the first time you may have 100 amendments. That tells us we're going to be here long. I don't know how long people are going to debate those amendments.
Let's go to the next.
Let me finish. I'm happy to give you guidance once I know what you're planning on.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for a parliamentary inquiry.
Is it not the rule of the committee that amendments have to be made available 2 hours before the markup begins?
2 hours before the amendments are considered.
If I could, since I'm actually have the gavel, it's the policy of the committee that they be considered 2 hours in advance. That's been the tradition of the committee, as you know as a chairman. I believe Mr. Upton knows. generally to be able to give more thoughtful consideration. The sooner they're filed, the better. So our staffs can review them, members can review them.
Okay, further parliamentary inquiry.
Gentleman's recognized for parliamentary inquiry.
Since it's the policy of the committee that amendments be made available 2 hours before the markup begins, and since this markup began at approximately 10:30, should not those amendments that the minority wishes to offer have been already made available in order to be considered?
My understanding is
I could
2
answer.
hours before the
If
amendments
the gentleman would suspend, it is the normal policy that they'd be provided ahead of time, 2 hours in advance. That makes it all work better for all members on both sides to be able to look at amendments. We look forward to the minority placing their amendments in front of us and filing, but it's pretty hard for me to figure out how long we're going to be here until I know how many amendments we're going to have.
All right, let's move on.
Chairman, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
That the amendment should be made available 2 hours before the markup.
2 hours before
And they have not.
The gentleman suspend.
And they have not been made available. And to begin regular order and consider.
There's no
the amendment.
regular order here. The regular order ended. There's no regular order.
With respect, Mr. Chairman, if the minority
Gentlemen will suspend. Gentlemen will suspend. We look forward to getting your amendments and moving through on regular order. Now, I'd recognize the gentleman from New Jersey. Do you have another question?
Yes, I do. My understanding, based on what you told us before the committee markup, was that amendments on any section were going to be in order at any time.
Well,
now, I'm told that you want to move to a process where we go section by section. That is not what we were told beforehand, and I intend to proceed with having amendments open at any time on any section rather than moving section by section. So let me ask again, is that the case? My understanding was beforehand that you were not going to move section by section.
Well, that's not what we shared with your staff yesterday. Was our preference to follow the same procedures that have been followed before, including by Mr. Waxman, former chairman of this committee, during the ACA markup to go subtitle by subtitle. It is still open for amendment at any time. If you don't want to proceed that way, we'll recognize the amendments. It just makes it more a thoughtful approach to go subtitle by subtitle. It's easier on both staffs to work through the amendments. If it's a Medicaid amendment, we're happy to go through the amendments. We'll be here till we finish the amendments. This was simply a way to make it more organized for the committee members and for our staff to be able to work through them, especially since we still don't have your 100 amendments.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I was told that your staff indicated to us that we were going to be open to amendment on any section at any time. We were not moving section by section. Regardless of that, we do not intend to move section by section. We're going to offer amendments on any topic as we proceed, not section by section.
Then we'll move on. The chair recognizes himself for purposes of offering an amendment.
I have some additional questions which I think would make things go easier again.
Really?
If we could go through them, yes.
Now you look forward to that.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, about rolling of votes. You know that when we had our initial organizing meeting, I was very much opposed to the idea of rolling votes. You expressed the fact that you were not going to try to roll votes in most circumstances. Today, in particular, because we have such an important bill, because we are all here and we're going to debate amendments as we go along, I see no reason to roll votes. So I would ask that we not move to a process of rolling the votes, but rather proceed amendment by amendment with the discussion and not roll votes, because it's important that members be here for the entire debate. So I issue that question. I would ask that we not roll votes.
Well, that it always resides with the chair to make that decision, but as I've said, I will consult with you on those matters for the convenience of members, but we intend to move forward amendment by amendment, vote by vote.
All right, I appreciate that. Now, my last question is about the actual vehicle before us. My question is what we're considering today a bill a committee draft? What exactly is it that we're considering?
It is a committee print.
Okay. So does that mean that in terms of the procedural pathway, that once this committee print has been amended and the markup proceeding has concluded, will that then be reintroduced in some form as a bill? Will it be introduced as a bill once we finish? Will it be reported out of our committee?
The gentleman probably knows what we do here is forwarded up to the Budget Committee. This is the reconciliation process. I know in the past, under the Democrats, this process was skipped at some point, and everything just was done up at Budget Committee. We're actually going through regular order to take amendments, to go through a committee print, and then we will submit our product to the Budget Committee.
All right,
there it goes to the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee will report a bill to the floor.
All right, so let me go back to that again. What you're saying is because of a reconciliation process and alleged regular order, again, I would point out that we're not doing regular order because we didn't have a hearing and a subcommittee markup. But if you're saying that this is the reconciliation process, I don't understand how you can make that statement, because the fact of the matter is that much of what's in this committee print is not in the nature of reconciliation. I mean, a lot of this is what we call birdable, which means it would have to be significantly changed before the Senate could take it up as a reconciliation bill.
Yield. Questions of Senate are of the Senate's decision-making, not ours. We are not bound by the rules of the Senate. We are the United States House of Representatives. We are the Energy and Commerce Committee. We will do our job in regular order as we have under our rules with due consideration.
All right, so what you're saying then is that even though this is a committee print and not a bill, and therefore is going to go through the reconciliation process, you have gone beyond the reconciliation process in terms of the subject matter, going into things that could not be part of the reconciliation process.
That is not the case. That is not the case. I'm not saying that. I don't believe that.
No, I understand, but Mr. Chairman,
if you'll let me finish.
Yes.
I'm not saying that. I don't believe that to be the case. This was within our procedures of reconciliation. As I say, the Senate has different procedures. We don't even have the option to have the Senate parliamentarians come tell us what we want. And by the way, I don't want the Senate parliamentarians telling us what we can or cannot do. Now, if we could proceed.
Well, let me just ask one more question.
This was your last question.
Well, except that you made the point that made me think about one other problem here. Why, if you're going through the reconciliation process, or if you're going to go beyond it in terms of the Senate, I know you're not worried about the Senate, I don't quite understand that. Why is it that we're going through this procedure as opposed to just doing a regular bill? It seemed to me
this is the reconciliation process. This is open to us. We have instructions to the Budget Committee. So I appreciate the gentleman. We're going to move forward. The chair recognizes
Mr. Chairman,
service.
We have a question from the gentleman from New Mexico.
Excuse me. If you would suspend, we're going to move forward with a regular order. The chair recognizes. The chair is not recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion before we go through the amendment process.
No, that is not how this is going to work. The chair recognizes
Mr. Chairman,
himself
I have
for
a
the
motion
purposes of offering an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Chairman,
The
I
clerk
have a
will report.
parliamentary
The clerk will report the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, a parliamentary inquiry.
Gentlemen will suspend. The clerk will report the amendment.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
Amendment to the committee print
So
offered
you're
by
not inquiry, Mr.
Title
Chairman.
I, Energy and Commerce.
I have a
Subtitle A,
parliamentary
patient
inquiry,
access to
Mr.
public
Chairman.
and health programs.
Mr. Chairman.
It's unanimous
101.
consent to suspend without objection. The reading of the amendment is dispensed with.
I object. Mr. Chairman, I'm simply asking for recognition with regard to a parliamentary inquiry. If you're not going to recognize that, I don't know how you're going to proceed.
Mr. Pallone, I didn't say I wouldn't recognize you. I'm trying to follow regular order. We were trying to dispense with that. Then I will recognize you now for your parliamentary
Mr. Chairman, I
inquiry.
objected to the suspension that you were just going through, and that was the subject of my parliamentary inquiry. So I object to proceeding.
So you're asking, which one of you wants to go first with your
All right,
parliamentary
Mr. Chairman,
inquiry?
let me ask a parliamentary inquiry. What is it that you just tried to do there with the clerk in terms of suspension?
We are on the this is, I'm surprised you don't know this. This is the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
All right, before we get to the amendment in the nature of a substitute,
We're actually, if I could correct you, we're actually on the amendment in the nature of a
I
substitute.
objected, though, Mr. Chairman.
All right, well, then let's read
So go ahead.
He was not recognized, Mr. Chairman.
We don't have to be recognized to object, Mr. Chairman.
No,
Mr.
the
Chairman.
the
You do have to
chairman,
be
the chairman has
the
the
gentleman.
power of recognition.
Yeah, gentlemen, we'll get through this. Let's just all settle down here. So what's your parliamentary inquiry?
My parliamentary inquiry is as such. And first of all, let me say this, Mr. Chairman.
You must state your parliamentary
You
inquiry.
have stated over and over again from the very first day when we began the organization of this
Does the
committee.
gentleman have a parliamentary inquiry?
Yes, I would like to propose a motion to postpone the markup for 30 days.
That's not a,
Well, the point is,
gentlemen will suspend. I recognize you for a parliamentary inquiry.
the problem
What
that
is your inquiry?
my concern here, Mr.
What is
Chairman,
your inquiry?
My
please?
inquiry is, why is it that after repeatedly saying it for the last few months,
Please state your inquiry.
my inquiry is, again, if I can state it, if you'll let me state it, is that after the last 2 months of repeatedly saying we were going to use regular order, that we were not going to try to jam things down, the members of this
Gentlemen have a
committee,
parliamentary inquiry.
now you are proceeding to do exactly that.
So
Okay?
what's your inquiry?
I said to you that I would like to make a motion to postpone the markup for 30 days. I don't understand why that is not in order at this time. It should be in order.
Do you have a motion at the desk?
Yes, the motion is to postpone the markup for 30 days. It's motion number 1.
I move to table the motion, if it
Well,
really is a motion.
Do we have it? Where is it? Can your staff provide it for us?
Yes.
When did we receive it? You
We
don't
received
know.
the motion 3 minutes ago.
Okay.
Don't we have to consider it for 2 hours before you?
No, I'm not on a motion.
Motion to postpone markup for 30 days, offered by Rep. Pallone.
I do move to table the motion, Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor of tabling the
Mr.
motion?
Chairman, I think we should be able to have some debate on this motion. Again, what's the rush? You said...
Mr. Pallone, I know you don't...
That's not
The question, let me rule on this, please. A motion to table is not debatable under our rules, and I know you care deeply about following our rules.
Mr. Chairman,
So
again,
the
same-
question now occurs on the motion to table. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
We ask for the ayes and nays, Mr.
The ayes appear to have it. The motion is
The ayes-
tabled. I'm getting there. That we will ask for a roll call vote on the motion to table. All those in favor of tabling vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Barton. Mr. Barton votes aye. Mr. Upton. Mr. Upton votes aye. Mr. Shimkus. Mr. Shimkus votes aye. Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy votes aye. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess votes aye. Mrs. Blackburn. Mrs. Blackburn votes aye. Mr. Scalise. Mr. Latta.
Aye.
Mr. Latta votes aye. Mrs. McMorris Rogers. Mr. Harper. Mr. Harper votes aye. Mr. Lance. Mr. Lance votes aye. Mr. Guthrie. Mr. Guthrie votes aye. Mr. Olson.
Aye.
Mr. Olson votes aye. Mr. McKinley. Mr. McKinley votes aye. Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Kinzinger votes aye. Mr. Griffith. Mr. Griffith votes aye. Mr. Bilirakis. Mr. Bilirakis votes aye. Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Long votes aye. Mr. Bouchon. Mr. Bouchon votes aye. Mr. Flores. Mr. Flores votes aye. Mrs. Brooks. Mrs. Brooks votes aye. Mr. Mullen. Mr. Mullen votes aye. Mr. Hudson. Mr. Hudson votes aye. Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins votes aye. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Kramer votes aye. Mr. Wahlberg. Mr. Wahlberg votes aye. Mrs. Walters. Mrs. Walters votes aye. Mr. Costello. Mr. Costello votes aye. Mr. Carter. Mr. Pallone.
Mr. Chairman, you are trying to rush this bill. You are not allowing for debate. And if this process continues all day long, it's going to be a very unfortunate circumstance here. We're going to be here all night for several days. I vote no.
Mr. Pallone votes no. Mr. Rush.
Mr. Chairman, I fully concur with our ranking member's position. I think that for you to keep talking about regular order when you're certainly out of order, I vote.
Let me just say for members, the regular order during a roll call is not to have a debate on your vote.
Mr. Chairman,
so we
here
will hold a
you
regular
go again, talking about regular order, when regular order is not what you are exercising this morning.
Gentleman's
You haven't
out of
exercised
order.
As of yet.
Clerk will continue to call the roll.
Mr. Rush.
Mr. Rush votes no.
Mr. Rush votes no. Ms. Eshoo. No. Ms. Eshoo votes no. Mr. Engel. Mr. Green.
No.
Mr. Green votes no. Ms. DeGette. No. Ms. DeGette votes no. Mr. Doyle. No. Mr. Doyle votes no. Ms. Schakowsky. No. Ms. Schakowsky votes no. Mr. Butterfield. No. Mr. Butterfield votes no. Ms. Matsui. No. Ms. Matsui votes no. Ms. Castor. No. Ms. Castor votes no. Mr. Sarbanes. No. Mr. Sarbanes votes no. Mr. McNerney. No. Mr. McNerney votes no. Mr. Welch. No. Mr. Welch votes no. Mr. Lujan. Mr. Lujan votes no. Mr. Tonko. No. Mr. Tonko votes no. Ms. Clark. Mr. Loebsack. No. Mr. Loebsack votes no. Mr. Schrader. No. Mr. Schrader votes no. Mr. Kennedy. No. Mr. Kennedy votes no. Mr. Cardenas. No. Mr. Cardenas votes no. Mr. Ruiz.
No.
Mr. Ruiz votes no. Mr. Peters. No. Mr. Peters votes no. Ms. Dingle. No. Ms. Dingle votes no. Chairman Upton. Chairman Walden.
Swing and a miss. Fred's back. Walden votes yes on table. Are there other members who wish to be recorded? Gentlelady from Washington votes aye.
Rogers votes aye.
Gentleman from Louisiana.
Aye. Mr. Scalise votes aye.
Are there members on the minority side that have not been recorded? Are there other members who have not been recorded? The clerk will report the tally.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 30 ayes and 22 noes.
30 ayes, 22 noes. The motion carries and the tabling motion
Mr.
is
Chairman?
approved. Yes, gentleman from New Mexico is recognized. For what purpose does he seek recognition?
The first point, Mr. Chairman, is I had objected to the dispensing of the reading.
Right.
He did. He said parliamentary.
I thought you were asking for a parliamentary inquiry.
In addition to objecting to the dispensing of the reading, I was also asking for a parliamentary inquiry because I was attempting to be recognized during your first request of dispensing of the reading, and I wasn't recognized, so I thought I would break decorum and just blurt it out the second time. My parliamentary inquiry is what's the proper way to be recognized to object when the chairman is asking for whether there's an objection to a ruling.
For what? So you asked for what reason you're seeking recognition. It was, if the gentleman suspend, it was a little difficult to hear your objection over Mr. Pallone's discussion at the same time. That's why I'm trying to keep regular order here so that we can be in a regular process and recognize members in regular order. And that's why I was trying to have one at a time and manage this. So did the gentleman have a parliamentary inquiry?
Mr. Chairman, my question is there a ruling from the chair on my objection to the dispensing of the reading?
It came late.
It did not, Mr. Chairman. No. Roll the tapes. I mean, are we at the Oscars here? Can we put something up there for us?
Gentleman will suspend. Really, the chair is, the gentleman did object to the dispensing with the reading of the bill, but this is why it's important and why I will continue to try to get regular order, because it was difficult to hear the gentleman down there when I had my friend here also concerned about things. So that's why, for everybody's benefit, regular order, I will keep regular order so nobody's discriminated against. So is the gentleman objecting to the dispensing with the reading of the bill?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that was my objection.
All right. then the clerk will read the bill. Members need to know this will take a couple of hours, which is fine. We're happy to do that. It would be helpful to the regular order process if the gentleladies on either side of the aisle have amendments. We would ask that you would have the courtesy to file those amendments so we can all get due consideration of the various amendments. I'm told you have 100 amendments or so by the Democrat leader.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Parliamentary inquiry. Is it possible to have a vote to suspend reading of the bill?
It is not.
Order or not? Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, a parliamentary inquiry?
Gentleman's recognized.
Going forward, what's the proper way to be recognized if the chairman is asking if there is an objection so that we can avoid having to yell and break decorum?
I wish I could help you with that. I was trying to get order here so that I could hear other members that are down dais. I was having trouble getting that.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
And so we are on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. We're delighted to share it and read it. As you know, it's been online since 6 o'clock on Monday. The clerk, or
Mr. Chairman.
10 o'clock yesterday.
Mr. Chairman.
10 o'clock yesterday. We're on the, just a sec, we are on the, I want to make sure I've got this right. We're on the reading of the amendment, the substitute. That's what we're on. That's what the gentleman objected to dispensing with the reading of. So we will proceed. The clerk shall read. Let me recognize my friend from Oregon. For what purpose do you seek recognition?
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I had a motion at the desk on this particular nature of substitute.
Yeah, I don't think we can get to that now until we read the bill.
All right.
We have to read it first. So the clerk will read the...
Mr. Chairman, could I ask one more sincere parliamentary
Yes, sir.
inquiry? At what point does this 2-hour clock start on amendments needing to be presented so they can be considered? In other words,
in advance of consideration.
In advance of consideration.
That
so
has been the...
If a member wishes to offer an amendment at some point today, they need to have them at the desk 2 hours before they're going to be offered. Is that correct?
Yeah. That is the chairman's policy.
Thank you, sir.
The clerk will now read the bill, the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Mr. Chair.
Inquiry.
Yes?
With regard to what Mr. Barton said. My understanding is that the 2 hours is a courtesy, and we're going to abide by that. But that doesn't mean that we're going to give, that if someone wants to offer an amendment a little later in the process today, that they can.
Well, I assume you're going to have rolling groups of amendments come our way. We've been told to expect to be here through the weekend.
Exactly.
And that you have hundreds of amendments, not 100 or so.
Well, I just want to make sure that the answer to Mr. Barton's question wasn't that every amendment has to be given to you now. That is not the case. I want everyone to understand that.
Yeah, as chairman, I do have some discretion in these matters in terms of giving priority to amendments. Again, to improve the thoughtfulness of our legislative process, it would be helpful that you all make your amendments available, unless there's some reason not to. It just helps the overall process, it helps the staff, and it makes it go better. People make more informed decisions, so I don't know why you would hide the ball. I'm not accusing you.
We're not trying to hide anything, even though you have hidden a lot. But the bottom line is,
we're going to
try to get those amendments now.
Thank you.
They're not all going to be available right now.
Okay, we'll see them when we see them then. And we'll go now to the reading of the substitute.
Amendment to the committee print offered by Mr. Walden. Page 1, strike line 1 and all that follows through the end and insert the following. Title 1, Energy and Commerce. Subtitle A, Patient Access to Public Health Programs. Section 101, the Prevention and Public Health Fund. In general, subsection B of Section 4002 of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, 42 U.S. Code 300EU-11, as amended by Section 5009 of the 21st Century Cures Act, is amended. In paragraph 1, by adding "and" at the end. In paragraph 3, by striking each of the fiscal years 2018 and 2019 and inserting fiscal year 2018, and by striking the semicolon at the end and inserting a period, and by striking paragraphs 4 through 8. reversion of unobligated funds of the funds made available by Section 4002 and unobligated balance at the end of fiscal year 2018 is rescinded. Section 102, Community Health Center Program, effective as if included in the enactment of the Medicaid Access and CHIP Reauthorization Act of 2015, Public Law 114-10, 129, Statistic 89, Paragraph 1 of Section
Mr. Chairman, there's no order in this committee room. We get
of
order.
such act is amended by inserting
Mr. Chairman.
an additional
Mr. Chairman, there's no order. I can't hear her.
for fiscal
Members on both sides of the aisle will please restrain themselves so that the gentleman from New Mexico can hear the reading and so can others. So if the majority members, I'm going to please the minority members and the majority members, but especially this conclave right here, if we can hold it down, and to the audience as well, you're exactly right. We want people to hear the reading of the amendment.
after 2017. Section 103, federal payments to states. In general, notwithstanding Section 504A, 1902A23, 1903A, 2002, 2005, A4, 1202A7, or 1205A1 of the Social Security Act, 42 U.S. Code 704A, 1396AA 23, 1396BA, 1396A, 1397DA4, 1397BBA7, 1399EEA1, or the terms of any Medicaid waiver in effect on the date of enactment of this Act and is approved under Section 1115 or 1915 of the Social Security Act, 42 U.S. Code 1315, 1396N, for the 1-year period beginning on the date of the enactment of this Act. No federal funds provided from a program referred to in this subsection that is considered direct spending for any year may be made available to a state for payment to a prohibited entry, whether made directly to the prohibited entry or through a managed care organization under contract with the state. Definitions. In this section, prohibited entry, the term prohibited entry means an entry including its affiliates, subsidiaries, successors, or clinics, that as the date of enactment of this Act is an organization described in Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 and exempt from tax under Section 501A of such code, is an essential community provider described in a Section 156(235) of Title 45 Code of the Federal Regulations as in effect on the date enacted of this bill, that is primarily engaged in family planning services, reproductive health, and a related medical care, and provides for abortions or other than an abortion, if the pregnancy is the result of an act or rape or incest, or in the case where a woman suffers from a physical disorder, physical injury, or physical illness that would, as certified by a physician, place the woman in danger of death unless an abortion is performed, including a life-endangering physical condition caused by or arising from the pregnancy itself, and for which the total amount of federal and state expenditures under the Medicaid program under Title 21 of the Social Security Act in fiscal years 2014 made directly to the entity and to any affiliate, subsidies, successors, or clinics of the entity, or made to the entity and any affiliate, subsidies, successors, or clinics of the entity as part of a nationwide healthcare provider network exceeding $350 million. Direct spending. The term direct spending has a meaning given the term under Section 250C of the Balanced Budget and Emergency Deficit Control Act of 1985 to U.S. Code 900C. Subtitle B, Medicaid Program Enhancement. Section 111, Repeal of Medicaid Provisions. The Social Security Act is amended in Section 1902, 42 U.S. Code 1396A, in subsection A47B by inserting and provided that any such election shall cease to be effective on January 1st, 2020, and no such election shall be made after that date, before the semicolon at the end, and in subsection 12C by inserting and ending December 31st, 2019 after January 1, 2014. In section 1951 K2, 42 U.S. Code 1396 NK2 by striking during the period described in paragraph 1 and inserting on or after the date referred to in paragraph 1 and before January 1, 2020. And in section 1920E 42 U.S. Code 1396 R-1E by striking under clause I-8, clause 1, clause I-4, or clause 220 of subsection A-10-9, and inserting under clause I-8 or clause 220 of subsection 1902 A-10A before January 1, 2020. Section 1902 A-10 AI-4. Subsection 12, repeal of Medicaid expansion. In general, Section 1902 A-10A of Social Security Act 42, U.S. Code 1396A, A-10A is amended. In clause I-8 by inserting at the option of a state after January 1, 2014, and in clause 220 by inserting and ending December 31, 2019 after 2014. Determination of EFMAP for new ACA expansion enrollees. Section 1905 of the Social Security Act 42 U.S. Code 1396D is amended. In subsection Y1 in the matter preceding subparagraph A by striking with respect to and all that follows through shall be and inserting with respect to amounts extended before January 1, 2020 by such state for medical assistance for newly eligible individuals described in subclause 8 of section 1902 A-10AI who are enrolled under the state plan or a waiver of the plan before such date and with respect to the amounts expended after such date by such state for medical assistance and for individuals described in such subclause who were enrolled under such plan or waiver of such plan as of December 31st, 2019, and who do not have a break in eligibility for medical assistance under such state plan or waiver for more than 1 month after such date shall be, and in subsection Z2, in subparagraph A, by striking medical assistance for individuals and all that follows through shall be and inserting amounts expanded before January 1, 2020 by such state for medical assistance for individuals described in section 1902 A-10 AI-8 who are non-pregnant childless adults with respect to whom the state may require enrollment in benchmark coverage under section 1937 and who are enrolled under the state plan or a waiver of the plan before such date and with respect to the amount expended after such date by such state for medical assistance for individuals described in such section who are non-pregnant childless adults with respect to whom the state may require enrollment in benchmark coverage under section 1937 who were enrolled under such plan or waiver of such plan as of December 31st, 2019 and who do not have a break in eligibility for medical assistance under such state plan or waiver for more than 1 month after such date shall be, and in subparagraph B2, in subclause 3, by adding and at the end, and by striking subclause 4, 5, and 6, and inserting the following new subclause. 2017 in each subsequent year in 80%. Sunset of essential health benefits requirements. Section 1937, B5 of Social Security Act 42, U.S. Code 1396U-7B5 is amended by adding at the end of the following, this paragraph shall not apply after December 31st, 2019.
Section 113, elimination of dish cuts. Section 1923F of the Social Security Act
is amended in paragraph 7, in paragraph A, in clause I, 1, in the matter preceding subclause I by striking 2025, inserting 2019, and 2, in clause 2, 1, in subclause 1 by adding and at the end. In subclause 2 by striking the semicolon at the end and inserting a period, and 3 by striking subclauses 3 through 8, and B by adding at the end of the following new paragraph. C, exemption from exemption for non-expansion states. In general, in general, in the case of a state that is non-expansion state for a fiscal year, subparagraph A1 shall not apply to the DISH allotment for such state and fiscal year. 2, no change in reduction for expansion states. In the case of a state that is an expansion state for a fiscal year, the DISH allotment for such state and fiscal year shall be determined as if clause 1 did not apply. 3, non-expansion and expansion state defined. The term expansion state means with respect to a fiscal year, a state that as of July 1st of the preceding fiscal year provides for eligibility under the clause I-8 or 220 of section 1902 A10A for medical assistance under this title, or a waiver of the state plan approved under section 1115. 2, the term non-expansion state means with respect to a fiscal year, a state that is not an expansion state. And 2, in paragraph 8 by striking fiscal year 2025 and inserting fiscal year 2019. Section 114, reducing state Medicaid costs, letting states disenroll high dollar lottery winners. In general, section 1902 of the Social Security Act is amended. A, in section A17 by striking E14, E14 and inserting E14, E15. And B, in subsection E, in paragraph 14, relating to modified adjusted gross income by adding at the end of the following new subparagraph, J, treatment of certain lottery winnings and income received as a lump sum. I, in general, in the case of an individual who is the recipient of qualified lottery winnings pursuant to lotteries occurring on or after January 1st, 2020, or qualified lump sum income received on or after such date, and whose eligibility for medical assistance is determined based on the application of modified adjusted gross income under subparagraph A, the state shall, in determining such eligibility, include such winnings or income as applicable as income received. Big I, in the month in which such winnings or income as applicable is received, if the amount of such winnings or income is less than $80,000, big double I, over a period of 2 months, if the amount of such winnings or income as applicable is greater than or equal to $80,000 but less than $90,000, big I, 3 I's, over a period of 3 months, if the amount of such winnings or income as applicable is greater than or equal to $90,000 but less than $100,000, and 4, over a period of 3 months plus 1 additional month for each increment of $10,000 of such winnings or income as applicable received, not to exceed a period of 120 months for winnings or income of $1,260,000 or more, if the amount of such winnings or income is greater than or equal to $100,000. 2, counting in equal installments. For the purposes of subclauses 2, 3, and 4 of clause I, winnings or income to which subclauses applies shall be counted in equal monthly installments over the period of months specified under such subclause. 3, hardship exemption. An individual whose income by application of clause I exceeds the applicable eligibility threshold established by the state may continue to be eligible for medical assistance to the extent that a state determines under procedures established by the state under the state plan, or in the case of a waiver of the plan under section 1115 incorporated in such waiver, or as otherwise established by such state in accordance with such standards as may be specified by the Secretary, that the denial of eligibility of the individual would cause an undue medical or financial hardship as determined on the basis of criteria established by the Secretary. 4, notifications and assistance required in case of loss of eligibility. A state shall, with respect to an individual who loses eligibility for medical assistance under the state plan or a waiver of such plan by reason of clause I, before the date on which the individual loses such eligibility, inform the individual of the date on which the individual will no longer be considered ineligible by reason of such clause to receive medical assistance under the state plan or under any waiver of such plan, and the date on which the individual would be eligible to reapply to receive such medical assistance. 5, qualified lottery winnings defined. In this subparagraph, the term qualified lottery winnings means winnings from a sweepstakes lottery or pool described in paragraph 3 of section
4402 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, or a lottery operated by a multi-state or multi-jurisdictional lottery association, including amounts awarded to as a lump sum payment. 6. Qualified lump sum income defined. In this subparagraph, the term qualified lump sum income means income that is received as a lump sum from one of the following sources. 1. Monetary winnings from gambling as defined by the Secretary and including monetary winnings from gambling activities described in Section 1955b4 of Title 18 United States Code. 2. Income received as liquid assets from the estate as defined in Section 1917b4 of a deceased individual. And 2. By striking 14 exclusion and inserting 15 exclusion. 2. Rules of construction. A. Interception of lottery winnings allowed. Nothing in the amendment made by paragraph 1B1 shall be construed as preventing a state from intercepting the state lottery winnings awarded to an individual in the state to recover amounts paid by the state under the state Medicaid plan under Title 19 of the Social Security Act for medical assistance furnished to the individual. B. Applicability limited to eligibility of recipient of lottery winnings or lump sum income. Nothing in the amendment made by paragraph 1BI shall be construed with respect to a determination of household income for purposes of a determination of eligibility for medical assistance under the state plan under Title 19 of the Social Security Act, or a waiver of such plan made by applying modified adjusted gross income under subparagraph A of Section 1902E14 of such act as limiting the eligibility for such medical assistance of any individual that is a member of the household other than the individual or the individual's spouse who received qualified lottery winnings or qualified lump sum income as defined in subparagraph J of such Section 1902E14 as added by paragraph 1BI of this subsection. B. Repeal of retroactive eligibility. In general, state plan requirements, Section 1902A34 of the Social Security Act is amended by striking in or after the third month before the month in which he made application and inserting in or after the month in which the individual made application. Definition of medical assistance. Section 1905A of the Social Security Act is amended by striking in or after the third month before the month in which the recipient makes an application for assistance and inserting in or after the month in which the recipient makes application for assistance. Effective date. The amendments made by paragraph 1 shall apply to medical assistance with respect to individuals whose eligibility for such assistance is based on an application for such assistance made or deemed to be made on or after October 1st, 2017. C. Ensuring states are not forced to pay for individuals ineligible for the program. 1. In general, Section 1137F of the Social Security Act is amended by striking subsections A1 and D and inserting 1 subsections A1 and D, and B by adding at the end of the following new paragraph. 2A, subparagraphs A and B2 of subsection D4 shall not apply in the case of an initial determination made on or after the date that is 6 months after the date of the enactment of this paragraph with respect to the eligibility of an alien described in subparagraph B for the benefits under the program listed in subsection B2. B, an alien described in this subparagraph is an individual declaring to be a citizen or national of the United States with respect to whom a state, in accordance with section 1902A46B, requires 1, pursuant to 1902EE, the submission of a Social Security number, or 2, pursuant to 1903-10, the presentation of satisfactory documentary evidence of citizenship or nationality. 2, no payments for medical assistance provided before presentation of evidence. Section 1903 I-22 of the Social Security Act is amended A by striking with respect to amounts expended and inserting A with respect to amounts expended, B by inserting and at the end, and C by adding at the end the following new subparagraph. In the case of a state that elects to provide a reasonable period to present satisfactory documentary evidence of such citizenship or nationality pursuant to paragraph 2C of section 1902EE or paragraph 4 of subsection 10 of this section, for amounts expended for medical assistance for such an individual other than an individual described in paragraph 2 of such subsection 10 during such period. 3, confirming amendments. Section 1137D4 of the Social Security Act is amended A in subparagraph A in the matter preceding clause 1 by inserting subject to subsection F2 before the state, and B in subparagraph B2 by inserting subject to subsection F2 before pending such verification. D, updating allowable home equity limits in Medicaid. In general, 1, in general, section 1917 F1 of the Social Security Act is amended A in subparagraph A by striking subparagraphs B and C and inserting subparagraph B. B by striking subparagraph B. C, by redesignating subparagraph C as subparagraph B, and D in subparagraph B as so redesignated by striking dollar amounts specified in this paragraph and inserting dollar amounts specified in subparagraph A. 2, effective date. A, in general, the amendments made by paragraph 1 shall apply with respect to eligibility determinations made after the date that is 180 days after the date of the enactment of this section. B, exception for state legislation. In the case of a state plan under Title 19 of the Social Security Act that the Secretary of Health and Human Services determines requires state legislation in order for the respective plan to meet any requirement imposed by amendments made by this subsection, the respective plan shall not be regarded as failing to comply with the requirements of such title solely on the basis of its failure to meet such an additional requirement before the first day of the first calendar quarter beginning after the close of the first regular session of the state legislature that begins after the date of the enactment of this act. For the purposes of the previous sentence, in the case of a state that is a 2-year legislative session, each year of the session shall be considered to be a separate regular session of the state legislature.
Section 115, Safety Net Funding for Non-Expansion States. Title 19 of the Social Security Act is amended by inserting after Section 1923 the following new section: Adjustment and Payment for Services of Safety Net Providers in Non-Expansion States. Section 1923A, little a, in general, subject to the limitations of this section, for each year during the period beginning with 2018 and ending with 2021, each state that is one of the 50 states or the District of Columbia and that as of July 1st of the preceding year did not provide for eligibility under clause I 8 or I 20 of section 1902 A10A for medical assistance under this title or a waiver of the state plan approved under section 1115. Each such state or district referred to in this section for the year as a non-expansion state may adjust the payments amount otherwise provided under the state plan under this title or a waiver of such plan to health care providers that provide health care services to individuals enrolled under this title in this section referred to as eligible providers. B, increase in applicable FMAP. Notwithstanding Section 1905B, the federal medical assistance percentage applicable with respect to expenditures attributable to a payment adjustment under subsection A, for which payment is permitted under subsection C, shall be equal to 1, 100% for calendar quarters and calendar years 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021, and 2, 95% for calendar quarters and calendar year 2022. C, limitations, disqualification of states. 1, annual allotment limitation. Payment under subsection 1903A shall not be made to a state with respect to any payment adjustment made under this section for all calendar quarters in a year in excess of the $2 billion multiplied by the ratio of A, the population of the state with income below 138% of the poverty line in 2015 as determined based the table entitled Health Insurance Coverage Status and Type by Ratio of Income to Poverty Level in the past 12 months by age for the universe of the civilian non-institutionalized population for whom poverty status is determined based on the 2015 American Community Survey 1-year estimates as published by the Bureau of the Census 2B, the sum of the populations under subparagraph A for all non-expansion states. 2, limitation of payment adjustment amount for individual providers. The amount of a payment adjustment under subsection A for an eligible provider may not exceed the provider's costs incurred in furnishing health care services as determined by the Secretary and net of payments under this title other than under the section and by uninsured patients to individuals who either are eligible for medical assistance under the state plan or under a waiver of such plan or have no health insurance or health plan coverage for such services. D, disqualification in case of state coverage expansion. If a state is a non-expansion for a year and provides eligibility for medical assistance described in subsection A during the year, the state shall no longer be treated as a non-expansion state under the section for any subsequent years. Section 116, providing incentives for increased frequency of eligibility redeterminations. A, in general, Section 1902 E14 of the Social Security Act, 42 U.S.C. 1396 A.E. 14, relating to modified adjusted gross income, as amended by Section 114A1, is further amended by adding at the end the following. K, frequency of eligibility redeterminations, beginning on October 1st, 2017, and notwithstanding subparagraph H, in the case of an individual whose eligibility for medical assistance under the state plan under this title or waiver of such plan is determined based on the application of modified adjusted gross income under subparagraph A, and who is eligible on the basis of clause 1.8 or clause I 20 of subsection A10A, a state shall redetermine such individual's eligibility for such medical assistance no less frequently than once every 6 months. B, civil monetary penalty. Section 1128A, of the Social Security Act, 42 U.S.C. 1320A-7A, is amended in the matter following paragraph 10 by striking or in cases under paragraph 3, and inserting the following, or in cases under paragraph 1 in which an individual was knowingly enrolled on or after October 1, 2017, pursuant to section 1902 A10A little I 8 for medical assistance under the state plan under Title 19, whose income does not meet the income threshold specified in such section, or in which a claim was presented or on after October 1, 2017, as a claim for an item or service furnished to an individual described in such section, but whose enrollment under state plan is not made on the basis of such individuals meeting the income threshold specified in such section, $20,000 for each such individual or claim in cases under paragraph 3. C, increase administrative matching percentage. For each calendar quarter during the period beginning on October 1, 2017 and ending on December 31st, 2019, the federal matching percentage otherwise applicable under Section 1903A of the Social Security Act 42 U.S.C. 1396b-A with respect to state expenditures during such quarter that are attributable to meeting the requirement of Section 1902E14 relating to determinations of eligibility using modified adjusted gross income of such act shall be increased by 5 percentage points with respect to state expenditures attributable to activities carried out by the state and approved by the Secretary to increase the frequency of eligibility redeterminations required by subparagraph K of such section relating to eligibility redeterminations made on a 6-month basis as added by subsection A. Subtitle C, per capita allotment for medical assistance, Section 121, per capita allotment for medical assistance. Title 19 of the Social Security Act is amended, 1, in Section 1903, 42 U.S.C. 1396b, in subsection A, and the matter before paragraph 1 by inserting in Section 1903a little a after except as otherwise provided in this section and B, and subsection D1 by striking to which and inserting to which subject to Section 1903a little a and 2 by inserting after such section 1903 the following new section. Section 1903A, per capita base cap on payments for medical assistance. A, application of per capita cap on payments for medical assistance expenditures. 1, in general, if a state has excess aggregate medical assistance expenditures as defined in paragraph 2 for a fiscal year beginning with fiscal year 2020, the amount of payment to the state under section 1903A1 for each quarter in the following fiscal year shall be reduced by 1/4 of the excess aggregate medical assistance payments as defined by paragraph 3 for that previous fiscal year. In this section, the term state means only the 50 states and the District of Columbia. 2, excess aggregate medical assistance expenditures. In this subsection, the term excess aggregate medical assistance expenditures means for a state for a fiscal year the amount, if any, by which A, the amount of the adjusted total medical assistance expenditures as defined in subsection B1 for the state and fiscal year exceeds B, the amount of the target total medical assistance expenditures as defined in subsection C for the state and fiscal year. 3, excess aggregate medical assistance payments. In this section, the term excess aggregate medical assistance payments means for a state for a fiscal year the product of A, the excess aggregate medical assistance expenditures as defined in paragraph 2 for the state for the fiscal year, and B, the federal average medical assistance matching percentage as defined in paragraph 4 for the state for the fiscal year. 4, federal average medical assistance matching percentage. In this subsection, the term federal average medical assistance matching percentage means for a state for a fiscal year, the ratio expressed as a percentage of A, the amount of the federal payments that would be made to the state under subsection 1903A1 for medical assistance expenditures for calendar quarters in the fiscal year if paragraph 1 did not apply to. B, the amount of the medical assistance expenditures for the state and fiscal year. B, adjusted total medical assistance expenditures. Subject to subsection G, the following shall apply. 1, in general, in this section, the term adjusted total medical assistance expenditures means for a state A for fiscal year 2016, the product of the amount of the medical assistance expenditures as defined in paragraph 2 for the state and fiscal year, reduced by the amount of any excluded expenditures as defined in paragraph 3 for the state and fiscal year otherwise included in such medical assistance expenditures, and double little I, the 1903A FY16 population percentage as defined in paragraph 4 for the state, or B, the fiscal year 2019 or a subsequent fiscal year, the amount of medical assistance expenditures as defined in paragraph 2 for the state and fiscal year that is attributable to 1903A enrollees, reduced by the amount of any excluded expenditures as defined in paragraph 3 for the state and fiscal year otherwise included in such medical assistance expenditures. 2, medical assistance expenditures. In this section, the term medical assistance expenditures means for a state and fiscal year the medical assistance payments as reported by medical service category on the form CMS-64 quarterly expense report or successor to such a report form, and including enrollment data and subsequent adjustments to any such report. In this section, referred to collectively as the CMS-64 report, that directly result from providing medical assistance under the state plan, including a waiver of the plan for which payment is or may otherwise be made pursuant to section 1903A1. Excluded expenditures. In this section, the term excluded expenditures means for a state and fiscal year expenditures under the state plan or under a waiver of such plan that are attributable to any of the following. A, DISH, payment adjustments made for disproportionate share hospitals under subsection 1923. B, Medicare cost sharing, payments made for Medicare cost sharing as defined in section 1903 P3. C, safety net provider payment adjustments in non-expansion states, payment adjustments under subsection A of section 1923A for which payment is permitted under subsection C of such section. 1903A FY16 population percentage. In this subsection, the term 1903A FY16 population percentage means for a state the Secretary's calculation of the percentage of the actual medical assistance expenditures as reported by the state on the CMS 64 reports for calendar quarters in fiscal year 2016 that are attributable to 1903A enrollees as defined in subsection E1. Target total medical assistance expenditures. 1. Calculation. In this section, the term target total medical assistance expenditures means for a state for a fiscal year the sum of the products for each of the 1903A enrollee categories as defined in section E2 of A. The target per capita medical assistance expenditures as defined in paragraph 2 for the enrollee category state and fiscal year, and B. The number of 1903A enrollees for such enrollee category state and fiscal year as determined in subsection E4. 2. Target per capita medical assistance expenditures. In this subsection, the term target per capita medical assistance expenditures means for a 1903A enrollee category state and a fiscal year an amount equal to A. The provisional FY19 target per capita amount for such enrollee category as calculated under subsection D5 for the state increased by B, the percentage increased in the medical care component of the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, U.S. city average, for September of 2019 to September of the fiscal year involved. Do you want to pick up?
Chairman, parliamentary inquiry.
Gentleman is not recognized. We are reading the bill at his request. Clerk will proceed.
Mr. Chairman, so we can be recognized at the end of this? Because I had to step out to the restroom, so I apologize to everyone that I had to go relieve myself.
D, calculation of FY19 provisional target amount for each 1903A enrollee category. Subject to subsection G, the following shall apply. 1. Calculation of base amounts for fiscal year 2016. For each state, the Secretary shall calculate and provide notice to the state not later than April 1st, 2018 of the following. A, the amount of the adjusted total medical assistance expenditures as defined in subsection B1 for the state for fiscal year 2016. B, the number of 1903A enrollees for the state in fiscal year 2016 as determined under subsection E4. C, the average per capita medical assistance expenditures for the state for fiscal year 2016 equal to 1, the amount calculated under subparagraph A divided by 2, the number calculated under subparagraph B. 2. Fiscal year 2019 average per capita amount based on inflating the fiscal year 2016 amount to fiscal year 2019 by CPI medical. The Secretary shall calculate a fiscal year 2019 average per capita amount for each state equal to A, the average per capita medical assistance expenditures for the state for fiscal year 2016 calculated under paragraph 1C increased by B, the percentage increase in the medical care component of the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, U.S. city average, from September 2016 to September 2019. 3. Aggregate and average expenditures per capita for fiscal year 2019. The Secretary shall calculate for each state the following. A, the amount of the adjusted total medical assistance expenditures as defined in subsection B1 for the state for fiscal year 2019. B, the number of 1903A enrollees for the state in fiscal year 2019 as determined under subsection E4. 4. Per capita expenditures for fiscal year 2019 for each 1903A enrollee category. The Secretary shall calculate and provide notice to each state not later than January 1st, 2020 of the following. A1. For each 1903A enrollee category, the amount of the adjusted total medical assistance expenditures as defined in subsection B1 for the state for fiscal year 2019 for individuals in the enrollee category, calculated by excluding from medical assistance expenditures those expenditures attributable to expenditures described in Clause 3 or non-DSH supplemental expenditures as defined in Clause 2. 2. In this paragraph, the term non-DSH supplemental expenditure means a payment to a provider under the state plan or under a waiver of that plan that 1. Is not made under section 1923, 2. Is not made with respect to a specific item or service for an individual, 3. Is in addition to any payments made to the provider under the plan or waiver for any such item or service, and 4. Complies with the limits for additional payments to providers under the plan or waiver imposed pursuant to section 1902A30A, including the regulations specifying upper payment limits under the state plan in part 447 of Title 42, Code of Federal Regulations, or any successor regulations. 3. An expenditure described in this clause is an expenditure that meets the criteria specified in subclauses 1, 2, and 3 of Clause 2 and is authorized under Section 1115 for the purposes of funding a delivery system, reform pool, uncompensated care pool, a designated state health program, or any other similar expenditure as defined by the Secretary. B, for each 1903 enrollee category, the number of 1903A enrollees for the state in fiscal year 2019 in the enrollee category as determined under subsection E4. C, for fiscal year 2016, the state's non-DSH supplemental payment percentage is equal to the ratio expressed as a percentage of 1. The total amount of non-DSH supplemental expenditures is defined in subparagraph A2 for the state for fiscal year 2016 to 2. The amount described in subsection B1A for the state for fiscal year 2016. D. For each 1903A enrollee category, an average medical assistance expenditures per capita for the state for fiscal year 2019 for the enrollee category equal to 1. The amount calculated under subparagraph A for the state increased by the non-DSH supplemental payment percentage for the state as calculated under subparagraph C divided by 2, the number calculated under subparagraph B for the state for the enrollee category. 5. Provisional FY19 per capita target amount for each 1903 enrollee category. Subject to subsection F2, the Secretary shall calculate for each state a provisional FY19 per capita target amount for each 1903A enrollee category equal to the average medical assistance expenditures per capita for the state for fiscal year 2019 as calculated under paragraph 4D for such enrollee category multiplied by the ratio of A, the product of 1, the fiscal year 2019 average per capita amount for the state as calculated under paragraph 2, and 2, the number of 1903A enrollees for the state in fiscal year 2019 as calculated under paragraph 3B, 2, B, the amount of the adjusted total medical assistance expenditures for the state for fiscal year 2019 as calculated under paragraph 3A. 1903A enrollee, 1903A enrollee category. Subject to subsection G, for purposes of this section, the following shall apply. 1. 1903A enrollee. The term 1903A enrollee means, with respect to a state in a month, any Medicaid enrollee as defined in paragraph 3 for the month other than such an enrollee who for such month is in any of the following categories of excluded individuals. A. CHIP. An individual who is provided under this title in the manner described in section 2101A2, Child Health Assistance under Title 21. B. IHS. An individual who receives any medical assistance under this title for services for which payment is made under the third sentence of section 1905B. C. Breast and cervical cancer services eligible individual. An individual who is entitled to medical assistance under this title only pursuant to section 1902A10A2 18. D. Partial benefit enrollees. An individual who, 1, is an alien who is entitled to medical assistance under this title only pursuant to section 1903V2. 2, is entitled to medical assistance under this title only pursuant to subclause 12 or 21 of section 1902A10A2 or pursuant to a waiver that provides only comparable benefits. 3, is a dual eligible individual as defined in section 1915H2B and is entitled to medical assistance under this title or under a waiver only for some of or all of Medicare cost sharing as defined in section 1905P3, or 4, is entitled to medical assistance under this title and for whom the state is providing a payment or subsidy to an employer for coverage of the individual under a group health plan pursuant to section 1906 or section 1906A or pursuant to a waiver that provides only comparable benefits. 2, 1903A enrollee category. The term 1903A enrollee category means each of the following. A, elderly, a category of 1903A enrollees who are 65 years of age or older. B, blind or disabled, a category of 1903A enrollees not described in the previous subparagraph who are eligible for medical assistance under this title on the basis of being blind or disabled. C, children, a category of 1903A enrollees not described in a previous subparagraph who are children under 19 years of age. D, expansion enrollees, category of 1903A enrollees not described in a previous subparagraph for whom the amounts expended for medical assistance are subject to an increase or change in the federal medical assistance percentage under subsection Y or Z2 respectively of section 1905. Other non-elderly, non-disabled, non-expansion adults, a category of 1903A enrollees who are not described in any of previous subparagraph. 3, Medicaid enrollee. The term Medicaid enrollee means, with respect to a state for a month, an individual who is eligible for medical assistance for items or services under this title and enrolled under this state plan or a waiver of such plan under this title for the month. 4, determination of number of 1903A enrollees. The number of 1903A enrollees for a state and fiscal year, and if applicable for a 1903A enrollee category, is the average monthly number of Medicaid enrollees for such state and fiscal year, and if applicable in such category, that are reported through the CMS-64 report and subject to audit under HF special payment rules. 1, application in case of research and demonstration projects and other waivers. In the case of a state with a waiver of the state plan approved under section 1115, section 1915, or another provision of this title, this section shall apply to medical assistance expenditures and medical assistance payments under the waiver in the same manner as if such expenditures and payments had been made under a state plan under this title, and the limitations on expenditures under this section shall supersede any other payment limitations or provisions, including limitations based on a per capita limitation, otherwise applicable under such a waiver. 2, treatment of states expanding coverage after fiscal year 2016. In the case of a state that did not provide for medical assistance for the 1903 enrollee category described in subsection E2D, during fiscal year 2016, but which provides for such assistance for such category in a subsequent year, the provisional FY19 per capita target amount for such enrollee category under subsection D5 shall be equal to the provisional FY19 per capita target amount for the 1903A enrollee category described in subsection E2E. 3. In case of a state failure to report necessary data, if a state for any quarter in a fiscal year, beginning with fiscal year 2019, fails to satisfactorily submit data on expenditures and enrollees in accordance with subsection H1 for such fiscal year and any succeeding fiscal year for which such data are not satisfactorily submitted, A, the Secretary shall calculate and apply subsections A through E with respect to the state as if all 1903A enrollee categories for which such expenditure and enrollee data were not satisfactorily submitted were a single 1903 enrollee category, and B, the growth factor otherwise applied under subsection C2B shall be decreased by 1 percentage point.
G, recalculation of certain amounts for data errors. The amount and percentage calculated under paragraphs 1 and 4C of subsection D for a state for fiscal year 2016 and the amounts of adjusted total medical assistance expenditures calculated under subsection B and the number of Medicaid enrollees and 1903A enrollees determined under subsection E4 for a state for fiscal year 2016, fiscal year 2019, and any subsequent fiscal year may be adjusted by the Secretary based upon an appeal filed by the state in such form, manner, and time, and containing such information relating to data errors that support such appeal as the Secretary specifies, that the Secretary determines to be valid, except that any adjustment by the Secretary under this subsection for a state may not result in an increase of the target total medical assistance expenditures exceeding 2%. H, required reporting and auditing of CMS 64 data, transitional increase in federal matching percentage for certain administrative expenses. 1, reporting. In addition to the data required on Form Group 8 on the CMS 64 report form, as of January 1st, 2017, in each CMS 64 report required to be submitted for each quarter beginning on or after October 1st, 2018, the state shall include data on medical assistance expenditures within such categories of service and categories of enrollees, including each 1903A enrollee category, and each category of excluded individuals under subsection E1, and the numbers of enrollees within each of such enrollee categories as the Secretary determines are necessary, including timely guidance published as soon as possible after the date of the enactment of this section in order to implement this section and to enable states to comply with the requirement of this paragraph on a timely basis. 2, auditing. The Secretary shall conduct for each state an audit of the number of individuals and expenditures reported through the CMS 64 report for fiscal year 2016, fiscal year 2019, and each subsequent fiscal year, which audit may be conducted on a representative sample as determined by the Secretary. 3, temporary increase in federal matching percentage to support improved data reporting systems for fiscal years 2018 and 2019. For amounts expended during calendar quarters beginning on or after October 1st, 2017 and before October 1st, 2019, A, the federal matching percentage applied under section 1903A3A little I shall be increased by 10 percentage points to 100%. B, the federal matching percentage applied under section 1903A3B shall be increased by 25 percentage points to 100%. And C, the federal matching percentage applied under section 1903A7 shall be increased by 10 percentage points to 60%, but only with respect to amounts expended that are attributable to a state's additional administrative expenditures to implement the data requirements of paragraph 1. Subtitle D, patient relief and health insurance market stability. Section 131, repeal of cost-sharing subsidy. A, in general, section 1402 of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act is repealed. B, effective date. The repeal made by subsection A shall apply to cost-sharing reductions and payments to issuers for such reductions for plan years beginning after December 31st, 2019. Section 132, Patient and State Stability Fund. The Social Security Act, 42 U.S.C. 301, is amended by adding at the following the new title. Title 22, Patient and State Stability Fund. Section 2201, Establishment of Program. There is hereby established the Patient and State Stability Fund to be administered by the Secretary of Health and Human Services, acting through the Administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, in this section referred to as the Administrator, to provide funding in accordance with this title to the 50 states and the District of Columbia, each referred to in this section as a state, during the period subject to certain 2204C. Beginning on January 1st, 2018 and ending on December 31st, 2026 for the purposes described in Section 2202. Section 2202, Use of Funds. A state may use the funds allocated to the state under this title for any of the following purposes. 1, helping through the provisions of financial assistance high-risk individuals who do not have access to health insurance coverage offered through an employer enrolled in health insurance in the individual market in the state, as such market is defined by the state, whether through the establishment of a new mechanism or maintenance of an existing mechanism for such purpose. 2, providing incentives to appropriate entities to enter into arrangements with the state to help stabilize premiums for health insurance coverage in the individual market, as such markets are defined by the state. 3, reducing the cost for providing health insurance coverage in the individual market and the small group market, as such markets are defined by the state, to individuals who have or are projected to have a high rate of utilization of health services as measured by cost. 4, promoting participation in the individual market and small group market in the state and increasing health insurance options available through such market. 5, promoting access to preventative services, dental care services, whether preventative or medically necessary, vision care services, whether preventative or medically necessary, prevention, treatment, or recovery support services for individuals with mental or substance use disorders, or any combination of such services. 6, providing payments directly or indirectly to healthcare providers for the provision of such healthcare services as are specified by the administrator. 7, providing assistance to reduce out-of-pocket costs such as co-payments, co-insurance, premiums, and deductibles of individuals enrolled in health insurance coverage in the state. Section 2203, State Eligibility and Approval, Default Safeguard. A, encouraging state options for allocations. 1, in general, to be eligible for an allocation of funds under this title for a year during the period described in Section 2201, for use for one or more purposes described in Section 2202, a state shall submit to the administrator an application at such time, but in the case of allocations for 2018, not later than 45 days after the date of enactment of this title, and in the case of allocations for a subsequent year, not later than March 31st of the previous year, in such form and manner as specified by the administrator, and containing A, a description of how the funds will be used for such purpose, B, a certification that the state will make from non-federal funds expenditures for such purposes in an amount that is not less than the state percentage required for the year under Section 2204E1, and C, such other information as the administrator may require. 2, automatic approval. An application so submitted is approved unless the administrator notifies the state submitting the application not later than 60 days after the date of submission of such application that the application has been denied for not being in compliance with any requirement of this title and of the reason for such denial. 3, one-time application. If an application of a state is approved for a year with respect to a purpose described in Section 2202, such application shall be treated as approved with respect to such purpose for each subsequent year through 2026. 4, treatment as a state healthcare program. Any program receiving funds from an allocation for a state under this title, including pursuant to subsection B, shall be considered to be a state healthcare program for purposes of sections 1128, 1128A, and 1128B. B, default federal safeguard. 1, in general, A, 2018, for allocations made under this title for 2018 in the case of a state that does not submit an application under subsection A by the 45-day submission date applicable to such year under subsection A1, and in the case of a state that does not submit such application by such date that is not approved, subject to section 2204E, the administrator, in consultation with the state insurance commissioner, shall use the allocation that would otherwise be provided to the state under this title for such year in accordance with paragraph 2 for such state. B, 2019 through 2026. In the case of a state that does not have, in effect, an approved application under this section for 2019 or a subsequent year beginning the period described in Section 2201, subject to Section 2204E, the administrator, in consultation with the state insurance commissioner, shall use the allocation that would otherwise be provided to the state under this title for such year in accordance with paragraph 2 for such state. 2, required use for market stabilization payments to issuers. An allocation for a state made pursuant to paragraph 1 for a year shall be used to carry out the purpose described in Section 22022 in such state by providing payments to appropriate entities described in such section with respect to claims that exceed $50,000 or with respect to allocations made under this title for 2020 or a subsequent year during the period specified in Section 2201, such dollar amounts specified by the administrator but do not exceed $350,000, or with respect to allocations made under this title for 2020 or a subsequent year during such period, such dollar amount specified by the administrator, in an amount equal to 75%, or with respect to allocations made under this title for 2020 or a subsequent year during such period, such percentage specified by the administrator of the amount of such claims. Section 2204, allocations. A, appropriation. For the purpose of providing allocations for states, including pursuant to Section 2203B, under this title, there is appropriated out of any money in the Treasury not otherwise appropriated. 1, for 2018, $15 billion. 2, for 2019, $15 billion. 3, for 2020, $10 billion. 4, for 2021, $10 billion. 5, for 2022, $10 billion. 6, for 2023, $10 billion. 7, for 2024, $10 billion. 8 for 2025, $10 billion, and 9 for 2026, $10 billion. B, allocations. 1, payment. A, in general. From amounts appropriated under subsection A for a year, the administrator shall, with respect to a state and not later than the date specified under subparagraph B for such year, allocate, subject to subsection E for such state, including pursuant to Section 2203B, the amount determined for such state and year under paragraph 2. B, specified date. For purposes of subparagraph A, the date specified in this clause is little I for 2018, the date that is 45 days after the date of the enactment of this title, and little 2 for 2019 and subsequent years, January 1st of the respective year. 2, allocation amount determinations. A, for 2018 and 2019, little I, in general, for purposes of paragraph 1, the amount determined under this paragraph for 2018 and 2019 for a state is an amount equal to the sum of 1, the relative incurred claims amount described in clause little 2 for such state and year. 2, the relative uninsured and issuer participation amount described in clause little Romanet 4 for such state and year. Little 2, relative incurred claims amount. For purposes of clause 1, the relative incurred claims amount described in this clause for a state for 2018 and 2019 is a product of 1, 85% of the amount appropriated under subsection A for the year, and 2, the relative state incurred claims proportion described in clause 3 for such state and year. 3, relative state incurred claims proportion. The relative state incurred claims proportion described in this clause for a state and year is the amount equal to the ratio of 1, the adjusted incurred claims by the state, as reported through the medical loss ratio annual reporting under Section 2718 of the Public Health Service Act for the third previous year. 2, the sum of such adjusted incurred claims for all states as so reported for such third previous year. 4, relative uninsured and issuer participation amount. For purposes of Clause 1, the relative uninsured and issuer participation amount for the described in Clause for a state for 2018 and 2019 is a product of 1, 15% of the amount appropriated under subsection A for the year, and 2, the relative state uninsured and issuer participation proportion described in Clause 5 for such state and year. 5, relative state uninsured and issuer participation proportion. The relative state uninsured and issuer participation proportion described in this clause for a state and year is 1. In the case of a state not described in Clause 6 for such year, 0, and 2, in the case of a state described in Clause 6 for such year, the amount equal to the ratio of AA, the number of individuals residing in such state who for the third preceding year were not enrolled in a health plan or otherwise did not have health insurance coverage, including through a federal or state health program, and whose income is below 100% of the poverty line applicable to a family of the size involved. 2, B, the sum of the number of individuals for all states described in Clause 6 for the third preceding year. 6, states described. For purposes of Clause 5, state described in this clause with respect to 2018 and 2019, if the state satisfies either of the following criterion. 1, the number of individuals residing in such state described in Clause 5, 2, AA was higher in 2015 than 2013. 2, the state have fewer than 3 health insurance issuers offering qualified health plans through the exchange for 2017. B, for 2020 through 2026. For purposes of paragraph 1, the amount determined under this paragraph for a year beginning with 2020 during the period described in section 2201 for a state is an amount determined in accordance with an allocation methodology specified by the administrator, which 1, takes into consideration the adjusted incurred claims of such state and number of residents of such state for whom the previous year were not enrolled in a health plan or otherwise did not have health insurance coverage, including through a federal or state health program, and whose income is below 100% of the poverty line applicable to a family of the size involved and the number of health insurance issuers participating in the insurance market in such state for such year. 2, established after consultation with healthcare consumers, health insurance issuers, state insurance commissioners, and other stakeholders, and after taking into consideration additional cost and risk factors that may inhibit healthcare consumer and health insurance issuer participation. And 3, reflects the goals of improving the health insurance risk pool, promoting a more competitive health insurance market, and increasing choice for healthcare consumers. C, annual distribution of previous year's remaining funds. In carrying out subsection B, the administrator shall, with respect to a year beginning in 2020 and ending with 2027, not later than March 31st of such year, 1, determine the amount of funds, if any, from the amounts appropriated under subsection A for the previous year but not allocated for such previous year, and 2, if the administrator determines that any funds were not so allocated for such previous year, allocate such remaining funds in accordance with the allocation methodology specified pursuant to subsection B2B. A, to states that have submitted an application approved under section 2203A for such previous year for any purpose for which the application was approved, and B, for states which allocations were made pursuant to section 2203B for such previous year to be used by the administrator for such states to carry out the purpose described in section 22022 in such states by providing payments to appropriate entities described in such section with respect to the claims that exceed $1 million. With respect to a year before 2027, any remaining funds being made available for allocation to states for the subsequent year. D, availability. The amounts appropriated under subsection A for a year and allocated to states in accordance with this section shall remain available for expenditure through December 31st, 2027. E, conditions for and limitations on receipt of funds. The Secretary may not make an allocation under this title for a state with respect to a purpose described in section 22021 in the case of an allocation that would be made to a state pursuant to section 2203A if the state does not agree that the state will make available non-federal contributions towards such purpose in an amount equal to A, for 2020, 7% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state for such year and purpose. B, for 2021, 14% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state for such year and purpose. C, for 2022, 21% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state for such year and purpose. D, for 2023, 28% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state and for such purpose. E, for 2024, 35% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state for such year and purpose. F, for 2025, 42% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state for such year and purpose. And G, for 2026, 50% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state for such year and purpose. 2, in the case of an allocation that would be made for a state pursuant to section 2203B, if the state does not agree that the state will make available non-federal contributions towards such purpose in an amount equal to A, for 2020, 10% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state for such year and purpose. B, for 2021, 20% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state for such year and purpose. And C, for 2022, 30% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state for such year and purpose. D, for 2023, 40% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state for such year and purpose. E, for 2024, 50% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state for such year and purpose. F, for 2025, 50% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state for such year and purpose. And G, for 2026, 50% of the amount allocated under this subsection to such state for such year and purpose. Or 3, if such an allocation for such purpose would not be permitted under subsection C7 of section 2105, if such allocation were payment made under such section.